everyone, and welcome to this edition of From Moment to Movement. I'm Tamara Banks, your host. And some of you may have heard, I don't know how you could have missed it, but President Trump his restoring truth order could bring back Confederate monuments, believe it or not. The president is trying to erase the work done around 2020's racial reckoning, including restoring monuments to Confederate leaders who fought to preserve slavery. Joining me now is Riva Maizlish, who is the senior research analyst with the Southern Poverty Law Center's Intelligence Project. Riva, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your insight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, talk to us about what's happening here. We had moved away from Confederate names on statues and buildings in schools. What's going on here, and how does the SPLC want to address this?
Yeah, well, first, to put it in context, I think we certainly have been moving away from memorials honoring white supremacists who made war against the United States for the purpose of maintaining slavery. But there are still over 2,000 Confederate memorials across the country. Then that's all over the country, not just in the South. And there have been people fighting against Confederate memorials, not just since 2020, but since the 19th century, since they started going up. So I just want to put this in the context of a broader movement that we hadn't completely moved past Confederate memorials, although we have certainly been making great progress. There's still a long ways to go, and this executive order is just sort of a bump in that long road of activism to remove symbols that stand for treason, white supremacy, and against democracy.
Well, you know what is fascinating to me is I've just moved to Atlanta in the past 4 or 5 years into Seastone Mountain, and the grandiose size and what it means is just almost overwhelming to think about. Are just this close to becoming a nation that is not a free nation. What do you say to people who say, "But that's my history"? You know, my great great grandfather or great great uncles or my aunties were part of the this, that, and the other. And to them, they say, hey, that's just history. Deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, this is not about one individual's family history. This is about removing symbols that unequivocally stand for white supremacy and treason. And then I would also say that, these are not actual remnants of historical memory. The presence of so many Confederate memorials across the country was part of an organized, massive propaganda campaign to erase history and rewrite the meaning of the Civil War. Right after the war in 1866, so 1 year after the Civil War ended, a former Confederate named Edward Pollard published a book called The Lost Cause. And in it, he said, what the South lost on the battlefield, it could still win in, quote, the war of ideas. And he said the war, and this is a quote, did not decide racial equality. So whereas Confederate leaders stated explicitly and repeatedly before and during the war that they were fighting for slavery and white supremacy, they began after the war to wage this war of ideas, where they tried to remake the meaning of the war as not a struggle between freedom and slavery, but instead just sort of a misunderstanding. And Confederate leaders were American leaders too. And this is all American heritage, because if the memory remained that this was a real struggle between slavery and freedom, there would be a lot of motivation for especially, white Northerners, white progressives to continue that struggle, honor the dead from the Civil War, and fight for civil rights and ensure that political equality that came after slavery. And so there was this massive propaganda campaign to rewrite the meaning of the Civil War, pretend that the Confederacy hadn't fought for slavery, pretend that slavery was actually a positive good, promote the racist myth that slaves were happy and loyal. And this is all part of this lost cause propaganda campaign. And so the Confederate memorials, and most of them came up long after the Civil War, right after the creation of the NAACP. You see a spike in Confederate memorials. After Brown v. Board of Education mandated school integration in 1954, you see suddenly schools being named after Confederates. So this wasn't something about marking history. This was just a symbol of white supremacy, a way of saying, no matter what the law may say, this school or this town is a whites only space.
Well, and you know as well as I do, I'm sure, if you go to Germany, we could take a page out of their book. You can't walk a mile or around the block without knowing something critical about the Holocaust. And they don't have schools named after Adolf Hitler. So, yeah, we could learn a lot from other
Right.
countries around the world, right?
That's right. And I would say not only should we be talking about the history of slavery more, but also the positive history of abolition, of Black and white abolitionists from the South. Where are the memorials to them? And also, many Southerners, white Southerners, actually have a lineage of white Southerners who fought for the Union in the Civil War. There are over 200,000 white Southerners who fought for the Union. Where's their memorial? Not to mention the close to 200,000 Black Southerners who also fought for the Union as well. So.
Right. So bringing it up to the 21st century here today, what can people do to fight back if they say that this is wrong? We're going backwards at best, if not, beyond 400 years ago.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there's a number of amazing community groups, grassroots groups all over the country who have been working to educate their neighbors, educate their community on the meaning of Confederate symbols, the true history of the Civil War, and also what that community can be proud of in terms of, maybe there was a stop on the Underground Railroad. Maybe there were it was a particular area where there were a number of white Southerners who joined the Union instead. So people have been coming together, and we really encourage people to talk to their neighbors, to just hold community meetings and say, look, I'm not happy with this. What are we going to do about it? And people have been doing all sorts of things, petitions, billboards. People have run for office, and there have been a lot of success on a very local level, city council, state legislature, in changing people's minds once they know the true history of what these memorials really mean.
That's right. There's a lot of great information out there, and it is accessible, at least for now. Rivka, thank you so much for joining us on this edition From Moment to Moment. We've been talking with Rivka Maizlish about President Trump's Restoring Truth order could bring back Confederate moments. Rivka, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you next time.